Carlos Condit versus Matt Brown takes place this weekend in the co-main event of UFC Fight Night Fight Island 7, Holloway versus Kattar, and this is basically the main event of this weekend. Actually, it's not really the main event because Holloway versus Kattar is an amazing fight, but this is the people's... It's more than a co-main event. It's the natural-born killer versus the immortal Matt Brown. I love this fight. I've been waiting for it for such a long time now, and we finally got it. Carlos Condit versus Matt Brown. Two of my favourite OGs in the entire game. The veteran of veterans that they are. Carlos Condit coming off of a win, Matt Brown coming off of a loss. And I think their recent damage that they've taken, especially when you're two older guys taking on each other, I think recent damage is going to be a huge factor here, because once a veteran starts getting TKO'd when he was a guy who was very hard to finish in his career in Matt Brown, it starts to maybe tell a sign that the chin is not what it was anymore, and he got finished by Miguel Baeza in his last fight, did Matt Brown pretty badly as well. I mean, he basically got finished twice in one night against Miguel Baeza, but also... being the veteran that he is, almost finished Miguel Baeza in that fight. Undefeated prospect. In fact, I actually picked Matt Brown to TKO Miguel Baeza in the first round because I thought Baeza's striking was a little bit and Matt Brown almost went out there and did exactly that. Miguel Baeza actually got saved by the cage because he flopped backwards after being concussed, but the cage kept him upright and eventually he went back, and Matt Brown showed a lot of discipline, actually, Miguel Baeza, in that bout, which is something to take into consideration with his own career moving forward, but then came back and almost... he basically finished Matt Brown twice in one night. Matt Brown, at the end of the first round, almost got finished, but he survived. Then in the second round, it was a bad one again, and it was a really bad finish. He's also been finished by guys like Donald Cerrone, by head kick KO, by Jake Ellenberger as well. I just don't like it for Matt Brown. Both guys have been finished by Damian Maia, and I think that's kind of the only way you can finish Carlos Condit, transitioning to his career. Also a bunch of losses recently, but still coming off a win, unlike Matt Brown. But those losses have all been by way of submission, or a guy has had to control him on the ground, like Neil Magny. Shot 6 takedowns, controlled him on the ground in that fight, but Condit even outlanded him on significant strikes there. Neil Magny's looking real good in that division now. That's not a bad loss to have. Then you've got guys like Alex Oliveira, was able to submit Carlos Condit in that fight, but Condit was doing good there as well. Then you got Michael Chiesa was able to submit Carlos Condit, but again, Carlos Condit had so many close submission attempts. There's a stat page here that says he had 1 submission attempt against Michael Chiesa. That's just a lie. That's just a lie. He had like a heel hook at one point. He had 2 arm bars, in my opinion, that was so close to being in. One of them was really close to being the finisher, but he also had a bunch of other submission attempts. I don't know why they've only listed it as 1. I think we need an update on some of the stats here, because I feel like some people don't even know what they're watching submission-wise. I have no idea what it takes to get an official submission attempt recorded. I have no idea, but still... Carlos Condit looked really good against Chiesa, almost snapped his arm off a couple of times, and RDA had none of that for Michael Chiesa in their bout, and Chiesa kind of just took him down where he were. I know RDA made one of the rounds close and maybe even won one of the rounds, but like on the ground, Condit still got some dangerous submissions. I think Matt Brown's going to keep this on the feet. I think that Condit could submit him off of his back even if Matt Brown does go to the ground, but I think this fight is 100% going to stay on the feet. I believe in Carlos Condit's takedown defense against Matt Brown, and I also believe in the fact that Matt Brown is not really a guy that shoots takedowns traditionally in his career anyway. He's a scrapper. He stays on the feet. Condit versus Brown, in my opinion, is 90% likely to stay on the feet for the duration of the bout. And I think if that's the case, which I can say very comfortably, if this stays on the feet, Condit is going to piece apart Matt Brown. It's going to be a great first round, don't get me wrong, but Condit's got an iron chin, and that's something that stayed with him in his entire career. I know he snapped his losing streak, which was a 5-fight losing streak against Court McGee, but he looked good in that fight on the feet, and Court McGee is a dangerous contender. Court McGee, people forget about this, is a guy who beat the likes of Robert Whittaker in his career and has some good wins in his career as well, but still... not the best win to get, but a good little bounce-back win for Carlos Condit. We'll see if he can get some momentum going, and we'll talk about what's next for these fighters, whoever wins, at the end of the video as well. But Carlos Condit, on the feet, is going to beat Matt Brown 100%. Even on the ground, I could see him submitting him off of his back. So I believe that Carlos Condit wins this bout. I'm going to say by 3rd round TKO. You're seeing a lot of the TKO losses of Matt Brown. He starts real crisp and real technical, and then it seems throughout the fight, sometimes he gets a little bit tired in the later rounds, and the technique starts to go. Hands start to drop down a little bit. The techniques seem to get a little bit lazier. Seems to get caught with a lot of shots against Cerrone. That's what happened in the 3rd round. Seemed like he was getting getting a little bit laboursome there. He starts lowering his hands a little bit against Miguel Beza. Sort of blew his wad on Miguel Beza in that first round and then didn't really have anything to go for the end of that round or the second round of that fight either. Hands start coming down. Opportunities start arising. And I think if he shows those opportunities against Carlos Condit, he will get TKO'd. And I think Condit will TKO him in the third round of that bout. But let's talk about Condit's last win against Court McGee real quick, because I know he dropped Court McGee in the first round, but the reason why I'm saying a late round TKO here is I thought the third round of the fight was Condit's best round, because in the first round of his fight with Court McGee, where he knocked him down at the end of it, I thought he was going to lose that round until he knocked him down. And it was good to see Carlos Condit knock someone down, because you could see it on his face. He loved that he had got to knock someone down, because you could see that he'd be robbed of that feeling for so many years. And I do want to mention this as well. I said 5-fight losing streak. Condit was on a 4-fight losing streak, okay? He did not fucking lose that bout to Robbie Lawler. He got robbed by Robbie. That's just how it is sometimes. You know what I mean? He won the fight against Robbie Lawler 3-2. Very, very clearly, in my opinion. Very clearly, and I've made a whole video about this robbery if you want to go back and check it on my channel. But for a title fight, this was really, really terrible. I thought Carlos Condit won very clearly. I know Robbie Lawler always has a good 5th round, but the judges score the fights round by round anyway. The 5th round doesn't account for any of the other rounds of the fight. Condit won 3 of them, in my opinion, and there was no 10-8s. Condit should be the former welterweight champion of the world, but he's not, and that was purely because of bad judging. But still, Carlos Condit, savage, natural-born killer. I think he definitely gets the job done against Matt Brown. He's got good kicks. His chin is better than Matt Brown, in my opinion. And coming off of a TKO loss again in his career, where he basically got KO'd twice in one night against Miguel Beza, I can definitely see Carlos Condit having a good scrap with Matt Brown in the early part of the fight. And then Matt Brown start to slow down a little bit, drop those hands, get a little bit heavy breathing. Condit showed that he had good cardio in the third round of his fight with Court McGee, landing the most shots out of any round in the fight. And Court McGee is a goer, of course. Court McGee's beating some good guys. But Carlos Condit is a savage. I'm really looking forward to his bout. Third round, he looked good. Still got the pacing. Still got the cardio that he had before. Volume striker. I think he wears down Matt Brown with strikes in the first 2 rounds. Then eventually starts mixing in some real powerful shots in the third. Once he feels the momentum shift. Eventually TKOing Matt Brown in the third round. But I'm looking forward to this one, man. Really am looking forward to this one. Been waiting for it for a while. They've got equal reach. 75 inches. Carlos Condit is the taller guy, which I think is going to have a huge impact here, because Carlos Condit has really long legs. Like, the reach doesn't really tell the tale of who's going to be the rangier fighter in the cage. I know Matt Brown might have longer arms, or as long arms as Carlos Condit, but Condit likes to keep people at the end with his kicks. He pokes at people from range. That's Condit's game, so he's going to own the range part of this fight, in my opinion, and it's going to be up to Matt Brown to make it a little bit sloppy and dirty, and I think Condit can go there as well. I think Condit wins this fight pretty comfortably, but Matt Brown's a dangerous fighter, and he's a good underdog here as well. I mean, these are 2 old guys. You have no idea what's going to happen in there. So I feel like Matt Brown actually is a pretty decent underdog in this bout with Carlos Condit. But I'm still confident in Carlos Condit getting the job done. Much better record overall. Beat much better competition in his career as well. I know Matt Brown has that one win against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that now looks really, really good in hindsight. What a great name to have on your resume. I mean, Matt Brown and Anthony Pettis share that in common. Getting that win against Wonderboy when they did, that's a really hard thing to do, and only Woodley has a win other than them two in the UFC period. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what goes on this weekend. But yeah, Carlos Condit, great fighter, man. Both of these guys scrap. Both of them put on good volume. Matt Brown takes a few more shots per minute, but that's just his style. He's a little bit more of the grittier guy that will take one to give one. Condit likes to play on the outside. Condit's got a better striking defense as well for a guy who plays on the outside, of course. Going to be harder to hit a guy on the outside that's moving around so much anyway compared to a guy who comes forward looking for big shots. I just feel like Condit's going to get it done. Matt Brown does shoot some takedowns. Condit's got great takedown defense. I mean, he's been shot takedowns on by some really good guys, so I think other than the guys like Damian Maia, Condit has shown great takedown defense. I know some other guys have been able to get some takedowns on him, but they've been really good grapplers themselves. I feel like there's no way that Condit's going to get smushed on the ground here against Matt Brown, and if he does, he'll have some submissions waiting for him like he did against Chiesa. I see Condit going out there looking great, a natural-born killer. Natural as he is, because he's been going for so long. I think that's a big clue on a guy who hasn't really taken too many roids, is a guy who can be around for this long and still compete in the game and look like he did a couple of years ago. Obviously not as good. I'm just so excited, man. I'm so excited, man. Condit is one of my favourite fighters. Matt Brown, one of my favourite fighters. Condit definitely gets the edge here, in my opinion. He's definitely going to finish Matt Brown in the 3rd round, and the winner of this bout is going to be in a good position, just outside the rankings, I assume, looking for a jump up into those rankings or a big name outside of those rankings. And at welterweight right now, we've got a bunch of big names. I think a great fight for this would be, if Condit wins, Carlos Condit versus Tim Means. I don't really want to see Carlos Condit, if he wins this one, chucked to some Sean Brady, just going to take him down and one-arm guillotine him. I don't want to see that happen to Carlos Condit, okay? We don't need to see that happen, okay? We know that Condit has a problem with certain great grapplers. We don't need to see the theory tested again now he's a bit older. Let's put him in there with some fun matchups. Stop feeding these veterans to absolute monsters coming up the division like you did with Miguel Beza versus Matt Brown. I want to see some fun fights with the veterans. Tim Means versus Carlos Condit next, in my opinion, would be an amazing scrap. I know Tim Means is probably not going to get a ranked opponent next, so what better than having them two scrap off in the co-main event? A lot of people are more aware of Tim Means' name now, since he has that win over Mike Perry. Co-main event of a fight night, Tim Means versus Carlos Condit. Winner of that one gets a jump up against a guy in the rankings, and we'll see if they can still hang with the rest of the division. I see Condit winning this one, though. Looking forward to it, man. Really looking forward to it, though. Carlos Condit, robbed against Lawler. He should be able to call himself the former. He's the former welterweight world champion. Carlos Condit just is the former welterweight world champion. You look at this fight with Robbie Lawler, it's just so obviously Condit. Won the first round, 28-12 on strikes. No one's arguing about the first round. The second round as well was pretty close, but I think it's the 3rd round or the 2nd round where everyone gets a little bit confused. I think it was the 3rd round of the bout, because Robbie Lawler had some good moments where he landed some good shots, and I think back then they valued that so much because they didn't like boring fighters, but now we seem to appreciate the delicacy of a point striker a little bit more. Condit outlanded him double in the 3rd round, and it was so obvious. I know Robbie Lawler had a good moment where he cracked Condit with one big punch, but it's not like he cracked Condit and Condit was wobbling all over the place or almost getting finished by a big shot. Condit took the shot well. Just because it's a big shot doesn't mean you get big rewards from it. I think a lot of judges see big shots as like, oh, he just didn't get KO'd. No, you throw big shots, guys see it coming, they can brace for those big shots and they can take them. It's often not the big shots to get the KO wins. Condit won the 3rd round, and that decides the entire fight because he dominated the 4th, dominated the 1st, won the 2nd as well. I mean, it could be 4-1, but I understand, no, he got dropped in the 2nd. That's what happened in the 2nd round. Now I'm remembering it clearly. He won rounds 1, 3, and 4. No 10-8 rounds. He even dropped Lawler in the 1st round as well. It should have been 3-2 Condit, and it wasn't. They robbed my boy, and I feel very bad about that to this day. And I wanted to share that in this video as well, because I don't feel like it gets said enough, because everyone loves Robbie Lawler. Condit was a champ, and he got robbed. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Condit. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to go Carlos Condit head kick KO in the 3rd round. Goodbye.